Good morning. One of the most exciting things that you do during your life is when you have a chance to see something happen beyond your wildest imagination. Paige said it very well when 2 decades ago we said we felt the internet, and if we were a key participant in it, would change every aspect of our lives, change the way you work, live, learn, and play. Everyone said, you know, that's a great tagline. Cisco, you make routers. But the point that I'm making, it is the ability to play out the game, to understand what's going to happen not next quarter or next year or 2 years or 5 years out, that allow each of us, both as a country, to defend ourselves, and for the vendor community in here, to stay ahead of our peers. The internet has been the most productive tool we've seen in our lifetime. And you have not even seen it begin. Because up to this time, it's been doing email, and it's been doing light connectivity. You're now about to see it change and completely transform every business, every government, the way we work, live, learn, and play, education, medical care. And it goes back to the basics that General Pollitt outlined at the very beginning. You've got to first connect. You've got to allow the capability for that to occur. Any device with proper security over any combination of network in whatever format you want, data, voice, video. But you also have to do it in a way that allows for your organization to have structure in terms of how the data is set up, the video is set up, the voice is set up, so that you can collaborate. Because collaboration will be the productivity tool for not just the next year or two, but for the next decade. Most of us in the private sector will drive our productivity 5 to 10% a year because of the power of collaboration. A GE will tell you they will drive it alone in terms of the innovation cycle for new products, cutting them in half. And instead of bringing their talent or expertise from wherever they are in the world into an emerging country to build a new project, they bring them in virtually and go to multiple countries per day. If you agree with everything I say today, I will have failed miserably. Because part of my agreement is to kind of challenge the group, talk about where technology is going. If you come away with one idea that will cause you to do your job differently and to outline with what you've heard in terms of where this is going, etc., then I will have done my job. I want to start, however, by saying thank you. Thank you to the members of DISA for providing the capability to protect our country. And also for many of you in the room who have been on 3 and 4 tours to Iraq and Afghanistan, I want to thank you again. It means an awful lot to us, and far too often we as citizens don't just take time to say, you make all the difference. I had the chance to be the vice chair of the 9/11 Commission for President Bush following the terrible event. I did that for 3 years. I understand what the people in this room do, probably more than many around the world. It's the ability to make a difference and anticipate what's going to happen. It's the ability to say the environment that we're in, as General McNabb said very well, the environment we're in is changing with tremendous pace. We have to understand not just the technology, but also, using my words, the mission technology. Now, one of the most fundamental things that I'm going to re-drive home today is that IT has moved from thinking about it as information technology to more of a network technology architected together to where it will be so deeply embedded in the mission that when we talk about this 5 years from now, we will be talking about mission technology, and you won't separate what IT does from the mission itself. The complexity that you're going to be asked to support is increasing at an ever faster pace. And as that complexity occurs, and I was just doing in my mind, 6 major missions at the same time. And understanding what that means, and yet the missions of today are going to be very different than the missions of the future. And so how do you build the capability to adjust to those changes, even though you're actually not able to define what the mission itself means? How do you really take advantage of innovation? And every government leader in the world, from Medvedev in Russia, to Prime Minister Singh in India, to our president here, to Merkel in Germany, to Calderon in Mexico, understands that their future of their country is going to be based on innovation. And they're beginning to say the way innovation ties it together is through the power of technology, often the power of an intelligent internet. Collaboration will be the key productivity tool within this. But yet right now, every one of us in this room, whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, knows you're going to be asked to do a lot more 3 to 5 years from now with a lot less. And if you accomplish that through a traditional means, or I would accomplish that through a traditional means at Cisco, just by doing a haircut, slowly letting expenses come out, you will not achieve that goal. You have to have the courage to make fundamental changes, not just in how you connect and use technology, but you've got to change the fundamental process behind it. Because when you change process, that is when productivity comes. It's having the courage to make those changes in process and also realize that culture is one of the biggest challenges you face. How many people in this room like change? Isn't change great? It really is. It really is. It's really nice. Do you like change, sir? You do not. Do you ever think about changing your spouse? Are you married?
Yes, sir.
How many years have you been married?
23.
23 years of marriage. Is it a pretty good marriage?
Fabulous marriage.
Fabulous marriage. You're talking about changing your spouse. I'm just teasing. You're turning pretty red. And he handles that with tremendous pressure, and I thank you for doing that. The point that I'm making to everyone in this room is what? Merely kidding about change with the person you trust the most in life makes us sweat. And yet I'm talking about fundamental change across everything that you do at the core of your culture. That's the only way this country is going to lead. We're going to compete against competitors at 1/3 to 1/4 the cost of labor at a population 5 times our size that have tremendous entrepreneurship and is every bit as well educated as we are. The only way you lead in that environment is through innovation. And innovation only works if you combine that with operational excellence to really bring it home. And that's really what I want to challenge us about. We know how to do innovation with technology better than any other country in the world. And the ability for defense and the system vendors to say, how do we do this that keeps this country ahead is really my goal today. And if you come away with one thing you would do differently than you would have before, that's my accomplishment. If you watch how fast this world is changing, its pace is breakneck. When you talk about innovation, you're going to be talking, doesn't matter, a government leader, business leader, they realize their competition is changing at a pace they've never seen before. They see the competition change on a global basis. Often the competition comes at them from a group they never even anticipated who they are or what they were going to try to do. You see a proliferation of broadband where no longer you're going to be thinking about a 2-lane highway to connect the devices. Within 5 years, you're going to see broadband everywhere in the world, including on the battlefield, in ways that we have not anticipated. It's going to allow the killer application, which we video, to transform the underlying of what you do your job. Within video, it won't be just the next voice. Video will be the platform, in my opinion, for all forms of IT and communications. Now think about what I just said. The ability to anticipate things 5 to 10 years out. As a company, if we don't get that far ahead, we get beat. I'll use examples of Cisco mainly to drive at home with specific data points. We built a router 7 years ago that did 1 billion phone calls. The financial market said, what do you need that for? There are only 7 of those required in the world. Sounds like the original computer, doesn't it? And yet 5 years later, 5,000 of them sold to 500 different customers. Today, we're building our routers to do 1 billion videos at one time. I think you'll see this with all the appropriate caveats for the financial community and lawyers in the room. You'll see the same type of takeoff. And it is the ability to capture this innovation that you're beginning to see in terms of global competition, and to design your systems not with how you do it today, but as you take these technologies that General Paulette and General McNabb talked about, understanding the process and the mission behind it, and how do you change the mission. If all you do is use the technologies to enable the way you're currently doing it, you will not get near the productivity or the effectiveness of it. How you think about what this means. And you know where I'm headed. I'm challenging you to say, I think we've moved from an information society, or economy, if you will, to more of the internet network society with the collaboration and with the video capabilities that go into it. The ability to think that in this last decade, we in this room often thought about the value created is how we process data, isn't it? Not anymore. It's about how do you provide relevance. It used to be about access to information. That was our power. That was our ability to make decisions. Today, what you want, and the most popular application in any business or government application, is how do you bring expertise to your end user, be that the warfighter or to the customer in business. It used to be a remarkably static environment that we operated in. Today it is dynamic, moving at a tremendous pace, and the architectures must be built to be able to adjust to that. Thinking about where you're going, it used to be very much individual, command and control type of decisions. It's not there anymore, is it? It's about social networking and communities of interest, and you haven't seen anything yet in terms of how that's going to change the landscape. It is the ability to realize where are we going, how do we prepare ourselves at DISA and as a country to really take advantage of these capabilities to unlock the power of the warfighter, to protect our country, and not do it in our traditional ways. And it's so easy to forget who we're hiring. It's not the 56-year-old who's learning technology, somebody like myself. There is absolutely a group of 24-year-olds with a college degree, but also the 18-year-old carrying an M16 in Afghanistan. They expect not just to have access to the device. They expect their mission to not only be enabled by the device, but change the way that it's been done. Unless we take this concept of how we really empower the enterprise, how we connect to each area, and then add the real value, because the value is not in connectivity, it's in changing the process and using the technologies of the future, which are video, which are communities of interest working together at tremendous speeds, the ability to bring access to whatever that person wants from any relevant position in the rest of the world. That's what America's great at. So our ability to make this transition will be keyed upon it. Collaboration is no longer optional. At Cisco or at any other company, my competitors are largely Chinese in the future. A third the cost, a fourth the cost. Their government gives them $40 billion loans. They have great engineers from very good schools. I've talked to a lot of them. If we don't move quicker on innovation and collaboration, we will get left behind. And that's true of any high-tech company in this room. Collaboration is no longer an option in our industry. And it isn't just about groups working together. The real payback on collaboration is in between the cracks. I'm not talking about breaking down silos in a horizontal application. I'm talking about fundamental change in everything you do in defense and offense. And it's the ability to think what we're capable of doing, to have the courage to not say, how do I protect my job, because this is what I know and understand. But to have the courage to say, let's change now, as opposed to find ourselves 3 or 4 years out with the budget really sliced and all we can do is do haircuts. You have to change the process underlying this. Am I making you uncomfortable yet? A little bit. That's my job. And it is the ability to create an unbelievable agile environment with flexibility, because we do not know where our next threat is going to come from. We just know that it's going to come from a group in a way that we haven't anticipated, where there is no wall we can protect around our country or around the world, or our allies or our friends, or a way of life. It's going to require the capability to build an infrastructure that is intelligent, one that really not only connects every aspect, but has the security, any device over any combination of network in any format you want, and has intelligence in the network not to connect, but to bring the relevant information through a summary where you can search off of it, where it automatically pushes to the communities of interest based upon the voice annotations, etc., that you put in place. It is the ability to do this across the ground, sea, air, and space I'm talking about, and I am talking about space. The missions of the high-tech companies in this room and DISA are remarkably similar. We've got to have situational awareness. In our industry, you miss a trend by 2 years, you never recover. You're a single product company and you miss about 2 years, you're out of business. It is about identifying those transformational activities and realize it takes you 3 to 5 years to bring a product to market. The ability to think out of the box, have your finger on the pulse, and being driven by your customers in terms of where this market's going. To understand that security is not an option, but everyone in this room knows the way we currently do security There is no such thing as a secure data center or a secure network. It's degrees. We're just 1 to 2 steps constantly ahead of the bad guys. It's going to require an architecture that's done differently. It is the common goal that I think we share that I'm really talking about today. It is the ability to think about what's going to happen. All information is going to be digital. All devices will become network nodes. You will not be able to stop the individual GI from saying, I want to use whatever device there is. Now you can, however, say based on time of day, location, allow you to certain applications are not on it. Or if you're in a really secure environment, say you have to use this type of device that's part of your organization. But I'm really talking about what you have to design is open standards for this network that allow any device to participate, and then say, how do you secure it? It's thinking ahead where the market's going, not where it's been in the past. I used a BlackBerry most of the time because I have access to my numbers all the time. I didn't want my competitors or the press ever to get a hold of that. And so we only had a couple of devices we used at Cisco several years ago. Now we allow anybody to use any device they want. And we have the same challenge that people in this room does in terms of people wanting to get access to our information. Our costs actually went down when we did that, and our user satisfaction went up. It's the ability to see where we're going, where video, in my opinion, will be the primary means of communications. We don't make any device that doesn't do video anymore. Every phone we ship, and we have the vast majority of IP phones in business and government around the world, is video enabled, even if you don't do it. Use it. My average day, and I'll just give you an idea this week, on Friday I talked to over 2,000 of our employees online and talked about the changes we were making and very good interactive capabilities. And it wasn't online, it was through telepresence, locations around the world, very tough Q&A session. When I go back Thursday, I will talk to our top senior VPs. The following week, I'll talk to the top 3,000 directors. 2 days later, we'll talk to 17,000 of the top salespeople in a multi-day session, all video-enabled around the world. And as you know, merely pumping video down a line, remote learning, doesn't work. It's how do you change that in terms of what is capable. It is the ability to think about where we are today. Is this pretty much what we'd be talking about today in terms of the design? Now, never agree with me too quickly, because this is what I put up in 2002 at DISA session. It is so important that we build an architecture that allows us to go where we need to go in an effective way. We have to mark down the silos. There is no way we can afford that, but more important, no way we can protect our country or our warfighter under the current structure. The bad guys, unfortunately, are just getting too good. And it's our ability to be ahead of them that becomes very key. And to think about how you do this, not just in a traditional way where we can put protection hubs over each one, but think about how we do this on a scale. Think about what does this really mean in terms of massive scalability across the board. Mobile ad hoc networking everywhere. Real-time video everywhere with multiple threads occurring at the same time. The ability to, within a decade, probably do a hologram type capability with it. Security information assurance everywhere. It's not only the ability to get the right information at the right time to the right group to make the right decision, which we all grasp. It is organizing that information in a way that allows you to make a better decision when you get access to it. The mission will be not technology enabled. It will be so deeply embedded in technology, in my opinion, you won't know the difference between the mission, business goal, if you will, and the technology that enabled it. Speed and scale are key. It would completely change business dynamics. We believe that when you look at the products and the direction going, standalone products are probably not going to be long-term in terms of the future. We think the products will be loosely and then tightly coupled together through open standards. Some vendors will try to do the majority of them themselves. Clearly, Cisco will be in that group. Others will tie together in terms of open standards on the approach. But it's the ability to do this with a simplistic way with products that are designed to work, that allows speed of take-up, lower cost, higher reliability, and the ability to therefore put new technologies on place or change business models. But where I spend my time is on the mission architecture. It's the ability about how do you transform business. When I call on government leaders around the world, and I've called most of them around the world, or business leaders, I spend very little time talking about routing and switching, even though I love the topic. I talk about how does the power of intelligent networks bring to bear the functionality where it's no longer relevant, where the processes are, the information is stored, what format you want in to achieve your business goals. Be those education, be they healthcare, be they defense, be it job creation. Every major government leader in the world gets this. It's about who executes the best. You may not agree with the 5 fundamentals that I think this future is going to be based on for intelligent networks, but here are the 5 we're focused on in Cisco. Our goal is going to be very simple: to enable through intelligent networks our customers to achieve their business goals and aspirations and their business transformation. The transformation is important as the goals and aspirations. These are the hard building blocks. It's how do you get routing and switching and security and mobility and services together to provide that underlying infrastructure. It's how do you take the next generation of productivity that will be completely around collaboration, driving conservatively productivity at 5 to 10% a year. How do you get the collaborative products to all work together? Because ease of use and open standards are as important as getting the products to go, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Data center, virtualization, and cloud, it is not going to be a gold rush. It's going to be a stampede. And we can call that enterprise infrastructure, which is what it really is, combining storage and networking and applications. But it is the next frontier with huge cost savings and effectiveness, and the ability to share that resource across all of our armed services very, very effectively. The ability to take video to the next level. But it is these architectures that bring it to life. Individual pieces you cannot afford the cost to put together. It's how you think about this ties to your mission. It's how does it tie to your priorities that I'm really talking about today. And I believe these will be your key drivers of your missions, as well as where I think the industry will go. We just had 16,000 of our top customers join us online in Las Vegas, physically in Las Vegas, and 40,000 online. With a subset who took time to really go through it, when I asked about architectures, first from the technology side, and then later from the business side, I said, what are your goals on architectures? 99% of them understood and said the very top one was increased reliability, security, and lower cost. The second one said products designed to work together and ease of use in terms of accessing that. Third area was easy to address new business demands. This one surprised me. I thought that would be number 4 or 5. But what they're saying is the ease of architectures to address your mission critical applications is the third biggest reason you do this. And remember, these are the techies filling this out. This isn't the business leaders. With 85%, I'm saying this is the key reason. And finally, the ability to adapt to new technologies. Really understanding that when you're coming along and all of a sudden you say, I want to move into collaboration, or I want to move into video, if the architecture you put in place doesn't already allow that, if the routers and switches and other devices haven't already built in the capability to do these new forms of video, these new forms of security, you can't move at the speed that is needed. While we may not be able to define our next mission, and we may not be able to define what about budget we're going to get to accomplish our missions of the future, what we can define is how technology will at first enable the missions, and what is the flexibility for the future. And how do we have the courage to make those fundamental changes using technology to change our organization so we can deliver dramatically more with less. Cloud, it's the most network-centric IT architecture ever. It has tremendous efficiencies, and I'm not talking 10 or 20%, I'm talking 70, 80, 90%. The ability to share services in terms of a common cloud built by DISA as an example, or built in part with a service provider partner, or with other groups within the organization, including containerized data centers that go out. The ability for any device to interface video-wise into these. The ability to tie this together across all of our armed services. The ability to tie together your collaboration with telepresence, conferencing, video capability, and the ability to share it. Why do people have interest in this enterprise infrastructure capability? Number 1, scalability. Number 2, efficiency, and available on demand. Nice way of saying you're able to do a lot more with a lot less, a lot faster. And that's true whether you're a service provider or an enterprise type environment. And when you really look at what happens, let's use Cisco as an example. When we put in and move from bare metal to virtualization, as Paul Moritz will talk about tomorrow, in organizations you find a tremendous uptick in terms of much lower cost of ownership. In our case, for the most recent data center we put in, 37%. Then as we move into early stages of cloud, we received another 27% improvement. And as we take the complexity of cloud and look at what we're doing, for example, with our own server architecture tied together with the network architecture, we think there's another 27% we can achieve. Think what this means in terms of efficiency. I'm not talking about combining data centers and achieving this. I'm talking about taking a cloud, combining many data centers, getting efficiency from that as a separate group, and then really a whole different cost of ownership. When you catch market transitions, that is when you separate yourself from your peers. We never move into a market unless we catch it in transition. Your ability to come late to a market and become the number one and two player almost always results in failure. We moved into IP telephony because telephony moved into the network as opposed to the traditional way. And when we caught that in transition, we moved it to about 65% of business phones. We moved into the transition in video 4 years ago with seeing the changes and how they were going to occur. We moved into the data center because everybody thought about it in silos. They think about servers here, they think about storage here, they think about the network over here, then they think of the applications in a different spot. They're going to be combined architecturally together. The ability to do that and challenge very good incumbents, world-class companies, and to within 15 months not only be in an industry that people predicted would withdraw, we're growing at 129% in a market that's growing 30%. We're up to almost 20% market share in North America, very close to the second player in terms of the capability. And it isn't because of server technology or networking technology or storage. It's how do you combine those and share. Now, the point that I'm doing is adding credibility to the comments I just made. We have to do the same thing at DISA. We have to say, what are the transitions going on in the market? How do we take advantage of these transitions in collaboration, in video, or otherwise? And that's how you lead your competitors around the world. That's what this country is world-class about. It's the ability to clearly see those transitions, have the courage to change yourself, have the courage to say, I'm going to stay with my wife of 27 or 30 years.
Till I'm dead, sir.
Till you're dead. No, I mean, how far so far? Boy, you're good. I'm not going to take you near my wife. I'd be in trouble. But having the courage to change, even when we know I don't know the other person on the other side I'm changing with as well. You can't afford separate silos. And while connecting all this is nice, all that is the first step. It's changing the process behind it that will determine the future of this. Look how quickly we bring up systems now compared to what we used to do. We want an application, we bring it up in minutes. It used to take 6 to 8 weeks, even for the CEO. The ability to quickly adapt to what occurs. We'll see how far the containerized data center goes. My view is it's going to have pretty good legs. But it's the ability really to move this virtually wherever you want in the world, physically first and then virtually in terms of the overall approach. It's catching these transitions that will occur and really focus mobile networking, whether it walks, whether it drives, whether it sails, whether it flies, however it gets there, giving access to this group and having the bandwidth available to change. The ability to think about how video will completely transform everything you do. The way we communicate and learn is largely by sight. It will be, in my opinion, I realize this is very controversial, the platform for the future, for IT and all communications. When you think about what does this mean, it doesn't just mean the networks will be loaded primarily by video. We already understand that with 91% of the network now being, in the next by 2013, video. What this says is this is a trend that's coming at you. But if you're going to use this trend, you have to think it through architecturally. You have to say, what is the open standards these devices are going to come together on? What is the capability for any device to have video capability, where the network figures out what is the device, What is your authorization, either by time of day? What is the screen you're bringing it to? What access of bandwidth do you have that you can take advantage of on that? Providing a floor underneath that called MediaNet, and it's going to be perhaps different for some of my peers, that allows this base to be built out, that you can capture the voice and then be able to effectively use these videos that are being created by the hundreds of millions of days going out 5 or 6 years from now, and then automatically send it to the community of interest that needs to go and be aware of it in a format they can take advantage of. It's an architecture. It's not standalone capabilities. And if I were going to take one thing away from General Pollitt's comments this morning, and I was the one that asked him about culture, culture is the hardest one to do here. It requires a willingness to have courage to change. You know when change occurs the fastest? When it's survival and you have no choice. This is survival for this country. We don't have any choice in the budget, do we? I'll share with you in a moment what Cisco just went through in the last 6 months. That allows you to move with speed and courage, perhaps, that we wouldn't do normally. It is the ability to also realize that if all we do is put in technology-enabled missions, and all we do is change our culture, we will have only achieved a very small fraction of the productivity. Productivity and effectiveness of that mission comes from what? Now, if technology is so deeply embedded to what the mission is, it is about how do you change the whole process, isn't it? It's the ability of the three to play together in terms of where you're going to go. The ability, when you think about collaboration, to bring together web conferencing, to bring together the social networking, what we call Quad, to bring together the video capability, we call it telepresence, to bring together the capability for any device, be it an Apple, a Cisco, or Microsoft device, to interface into this architecture, over any combination of network to any content, managed or unmanaged. And it's got to be CEO idiot-proof, and I'm the idiot. If I can't operate it, we shouldn't bring it to market. It's the ability to really make this easy to use, because what is the number one feature for collaboration that users expect? Ease of use. Number two is interoperability. So it's thinking about how you pull this together in terms of where the market's going. And again, coming at it with an architectural point of view, not individual pinpoint products. The way we purchase has to change. The way we think about how things are going to occur in the market, we have to anticipate where does this market go and what are the challenges involved with it. How do we really realize how complex security is? And we're only, as I said earlier, one step, maybe two ahead of the bad guys. And at times not that far. It probably has to be a whole architecture on security embedded into every single node in the network, with the network being like the human body with intelligence throughout, built into each router, each switch, into each ASIC, software, hardware, allowing all participants within the industry to do this on an open architecture. That's the only way I know to make it secure long term. We'll see if we can drive on that as much as we can with our next architecture. But the point that I'm making is pinpoint products the bad guys find the way around. It's how do we do this where it doesn't require human intervention? Because by the time the human intervenes, they're already in and they got whatever you want. And while we might challenge in terms of certain countries, i.e. the Chinese as an example, on being how effective they are getting into the networks, make no mistake about it, Russia's even more effective. They just don't leave their fingerprints afterwards. And that's before you get into rogue nation states. The ability within that environment for terrorists to access our information and change things. Now, this isn't a reflection on countries. The point that I'm making is every country in the world will develop offensive and defensive capabilities here. The key is how are we the best in the world at doing this? Best at innovation and best at balance. The ability to think out of the box on how does each one of these tie together. So it isn't just collaboration has its own architecture, or video has its own architecture, or the data center has its own architecture, or security or mobility. It's how do you get these pieces architecturally coming together. That's the fundamental change we're going to do. This, we think, is a differentiator versus our peers in the industry, our competitors. You begin to look at where it's going. We're putting routers up in space, not because it's a big market this year, but it's going to be, in my opinion, a very big market 3-5 years out, both in terms of resiliency and the capability to do that, and to drive it through so literally you bring new meaning to space and air and travel on this. The ability to say, how do you do this, whether it's as simple as dealing with the terrible challenges that occurred in terms of Haiti with relief there, where you provide this capability, or to bring our families to our troops supporting us in Iraq. The ability to think out of the box on how does this change the whole paradigm. Seamless and IP networking across the board, literally with space networks, airborne, ground, and sea. The ability to change dramatically how we do this on a scalable basis. The ability to realize that while we think that getting a couple devices, i.e. a video device and maybe a phone, is kind of where the market's going, look at these numbers. In 2007, 1/10 the number of devices per person in the world. 2010, it's 5. 2013, 140. That might be off by 10 or 15. But think about what this means to the individual warfighter and what she or he should expect us to be able to do to provide information to them to make decisions on ways that we haven't anticipated before. The ability to think about how do we change things. When you think about change, if it takes us 18 months to get a certification process, what does that really mean to our country's ability to lead? I have many products now, especially in low latency financial markets, whose product life cycle isn't 18 months. We've got to change this. We've got to say, how do we break down some silos in a constructive way? How do we do it off of open standards? As you begin to think about where this goes, the willingness to have the courage to change. We hit some bumps early this year. Candidly, it was a question about public sector spending in the market overall. Cisco, unfortunately, and I used to say I didn't know if it was good or bad, sees things 2 to 4 quarters ahead of our peers. We saw it in 2001. I made the mistake in March of 2001 saying this was a 100-year flood. Most of my peers hadn't experienced yet. We got beat up pretty good for a couple of quarters, and yet all of us know this was the toughest time high tech has ever had. We said in 2007, the financial industry, in August of 2007, something wasn't right. You could tell by the order sheets. And yet 9 months later, we all know what happened. January of 2009, we said, it's starting to feel good. I think we were the only optimists at Davos. But you could see it start to turn up early. And about 3 quarters ago, we saw the spending in state start to slow. We connected the dots, said it's going to go to federal government. Connected the dots, and we said the networking industry is going to slow. So we could have just done a haircut, bring expenses down a little bit, and continue to do things that we had done before. Just like the challenge we face in this room. What did we do? We reorganized all of Cisco in 120 days. We completely changed our engineering organization. Instead of having 4 or 5 groups do switching and actually compete, one does it. Instead of 3 or 4 operating system groups, one. Instead of multiple ASICs groups, one. Instead of multiple video groups, one. In terms of multiple collaboration groups, one. Now that was hard for my engineers. And part of the reason we didn't do it before, because change not only makes them uncomfortable, you're liable to lose them out of your company. It's amazing when you face a challenge, how it forces you to change. We changed sales. We'd gotten fat in the middle. Great sales team. But do you know we had 30% of our sales operation in overlay and specialists from home office supporting the field? We moved it from 70% of our people out in the field and responsible in the field to 90%. We realigned 22,700 people. A third of the organization we realigned to where the structure needs to go in the future. And at the same time we do this, we had our best quarter ever in growing orders. The ability to do this with a tremendous speed is what innovation's about. Now, I would have done anything to avoid this. But if you look where we'll be 3 to 5 years from now, it's because of these decisions. So I'm not challenging you in a theoretical way to make the changes within your organization. I'm saying as a country, and for those of us in high tech, this is what it's all about for the future. And realize how fast this market moves. This is stock performance of 4 or 5 of my peers in the industry. In the blue, year to date. In the yellow, since July 1st. And these are great companies. HP, Juniper, F5, Riverbed, Brocade's not on it. Watch what happens if you change or not. This is like 2001. 2001, A few of us changed, most did not. The reason I bring this back is not to talk about Cisco. The reason I bring this back is, as a country we've always led, we must continue to lead. Leadership is about having the vision of where you go. What is your strategy to get there? The ability to catch your market trends. The most important thing for you to do as a leader to be successful is what? Quality of team you put around you. The ability to realize that now I measure my leaders entirely on collaboration, where I used to measure them on did they do the diving catch or did their own group win. And also move the decisions much further down in the organization, in my words, based on profitability, not just booking growth. When we make the changes, you do it different in terms of how you use technology, but you also must dramatically change process, and you got to change culture. And what's the hardest culture to change? The ones that's been very successful. That's what we face, isn't it? The ability to think about where does this take us for the future. What each of us from the vendor community in the room would love to do in partnership, and I think I can speak for my peers on this, is we want the candid feedback. What are we doing that you like? What do you think we have to do better? Government, something changed about a decade ago. I don't know what it was, but I was with Wang Laboratories and IBM 20 to 30 years ago. And it used to be the government here in the U.S. often drove technology in directions. And then for a combination of reasons, I don't know what they were, we got away from doing that. You've seen that change in the last decade, where very often what we see in defense or government as a whole is what the commercial environment will see shortly. So working together to design our joint technologies. And how do we leverage commercial applications, as General Paulette said earlier and General McNabb as well, because the only way you have staying power is for them to have skill in the commercial environment to continue to support our government requirements. Partnering, I think, is a requirement, the ability to move fast. How do we work together to give our warfighters on their mission their greatest advantage? How do we ensure that the technology is secure and does not put our warfighters at greater risk? I started off by saying, if you agree with everything I've said, I will fail miserably. If you got one idea that you like today, then I've accomplished my goal. But I want to leave on the same message that I started with. For those of you who protect our country day in and day out, we all thank you.